Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote-unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp, and those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Stop by Sherwin-Williams and get 30% off select paints and stains June 13th through the 23rd. It's the perfect time to transform your space with color. Refresh your home inside and out with colors that make every space feel brand new. From cozy interiors to stunning exteriors, we've got the perfect shade for your next project. Shop the sale online or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
Well, Donald Trump has left the building. No, he's not just left the building, he's left the country a day earlier. The G7 continues, however, without him. Its second and final day without President Donald Trump, who flew out on Air Force One last night after dinner. Trump says he left early due to escalating tensions in the Middle East, and he'll miss the day Prime Minister Mark Carney is scheduled to focus on foreign policy. Carney is to hold bilateral talks with both Ukrainian President Zelensky and the Indian Prime Minister Modi on the sidelines. Modi's visit has prompted loud protests from 6 separatist groups after the RCMP accused New Delhi of involvement in extortion, coercion, and homicide. So we'll talk with Cormac Mac Sweeney in just a couple of minutes about all of this, and we will get your take on this as well when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12. Also, something that caught my attention this morning. I saw this on the Global News website this morning. Some members of Halifax Regional Council are taking issue with the province weighing in on municipal issues. Last week, Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston sided with the city's mayor on his motion calling for all bike lane construction to be halted. Now, some are wondering how far provincial overreach will go between Houston's government and Mayor Andy Fillmore. Councillor Sean Cleary said it feels like the Premier wants to run Halifax, while others call it undemocratic. Catherine Morris, who was on the show yesterday, says, quote, it's really an undemocratic development because many of HRM's plans were developed with the public at public hearings or doing public consultations. So when the province steps in and overrules, they're really overruling residents of HRM. That, according to Catherine Morris. So one of the questions that I will ask you to weigh in on, and by the way, Sean Cleary will join the show on Thursday to talk about all of this. That's the earliest I could schedule him to get into this. Is, do you agree with Cleary and Catherine Morris? Should the Premier stay out of HRM's business? Or do you like the Premier's candid comments, refreshing, and is this a new era of politics? And is this perhaps another example of what some call a thin-skinned HRM council? What are your thoughts on that? We will take your calls on that between 11 and 12. And again, whatever else you've got in your mind. I've got some other things in the pile as well. Of course, you can talk for those of you who are so inclined about the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. Game 6 goes tonight. Can the Oilers pull it off? I think that you just never know what teams are going to show up. You just never know what's going to happen here. I think that Edmonton can certainly get it done. They've proven that they can get it done. But Florida, look, Florida to me seems poised to win on home ice and to close this thing out. If I had to put money down, it would be with Florida. I think that's where the save money would be. However, we shall see. I certainly hope Edmonton wins. I'd love to see a Game 7 back in Edmonton. That would be quite a scene, and anything can happen in a Game 7. We know that. So Edmonton's got to bring it. McDavid's got to bring it. McDavid has been known to be, his track record is when it really, really matters, he steps up. That is what he's been known for. and Edmonton really needs him tonight. So we shall see. It should be an exciting game nonetheless. I think it's a 9 o'clock start. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks to Vanessa Vandeness as well on the other side of the glass at the control boards. Doing a fine job as always. All right, speaking of the G7, Cormac Mac Sweeney joined us, our parliamentary reporter. Cormac, how are things out in Alberta?
Well, just getting up here. It's going to be another very busy day at the G7, but, beautiful scenery for the world leaders and world media to come to. But it's a packed schedule and lots of developments, as it always seems to be whenever President Donald Trump is around.
Yeah, is the air a little bit out of the balloon, though, with Trump leaving town?
It was unexpected. We thought he'd be staying here for the full summit, but he decided to take off early, obviously, as I'm sure you've been hearing throughout the morning, due to the escalations in the Middle East, talking about something big happening. So it was not planned that way. So it was a surprise to a lot of us after a number of different developments yesterday on the trade front that he would be taking off early. But I think his departure and the growing conflict in the Middle East is definitely going to be on the lips of a lot of leaders today.
Yeah, just kind of reading his body language, just you would know better than I, but he appeared to be a little disengaged, a little almost bored. That was my read on his body language and his tone. Am I misreading that, or what are your thoughts on Trump?
Well, it's hard to kind of read into that sometimes. His language about leaving, when Trump is not happy, he generally lets you know that he's not happy. But on his way out, after the group photo that took place yesterday, he was saying that he had a great relationship with everybody and he did feel bad about leaving, but he had to go because of what was happening. I think in any of these situations, there's a lot we don't know about what he's talking about in terms of what he knows. He's the so-called leader of the free world. The head of the United States has a lot on his plate. He's been talking about something big happening in this conflict. So I think there is something afoot. Something is going to happen. We'll wait to see what that ends up being. But, if you're a world leader and you're privy to that information, you have to have conversations with your National Security Council once you get back to Washington. You've got a lot on your mind, and photo ops and the remainder of the sessions maybe with the G7 probably wouldn't be your priority.
Okay, people were looking for a trade deal to emerge from this. There was a lot of speculation that might happen. How much speculation was there that a deal between the two countries might be brokered during this meeting?
Well, it's kind of funny. It went up and down throughout this. So in the lead up to the G7, there were tampered expectations that we would get a deal. There were signals from the Canadian side that don't expect a deal, but there was also a lot of pressure that maybe that could happen. And with Donald Trump, this is the thing. You never know. You're not sure what he's going to say, what is going to develop throughout something. So when he had his photo op with Prime Minister Mark Carney, after the two had met privately for about 20 to 30 minutes, he started talking about trade. He said trade and trade with Canada were his priorities at the summit. He wanted to get something done. So then that opened the avenue to maybe we will get a deal. Maybe we will get something, maybe like the UK, something a little bit more like an open framework to move towards something a little bit more concrete later on. But in the end, we were waiting for something. It didn't develop. We thought that would be it. And then the Prime Minister's office came out. We did have a scrum as well with Dominic LeBlanc, the Canada-U.S. Trade Minister, as well as Kristen Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the U.S., and they said that things were progressing really good, and there was an agreement to accelerate talks, and that later this week they were going to be meeting again with U.S. officials. And it wasn't until late in the day that we got a readout from the Prime Minister's office that's sort of like a statement that goes over what leaders discuss when they get together. And in that readout, the Prime Minister's office revealed that Trump and Carney had agreed that they would try to negotiate a deal within the next 30 days. So that was surprising to everybody because we had just gone through both a photo op, a number of questions with President Trump and the Prime Minister, and as well as a scrum with the minister and ambassador, and nobody had mentioned that up until this readout. But nonetheless, it appears we're on track to have some sort of economic and security deal within the next 30 days. Trump, of course, politically back at home, he wants a win on the trade front. It hasn't been going exactly, I think, as he had planned in terms of the economic boom he thought he would get from his tariff plan, but he wants to get these deals done quick so that he can claim victory. Canada also wants to stop the suffering that we've been feeling through our economy, so we want a new deal quick. The question will be what's in that. I know a business group was telling me that they think, it's going to be largely on the issues that we've already heard about: steel and aluminum, the auto industry, critical minerals, things like that. They've been a big point of the discussions. We can expect that whenever we get a deal. But of course, again, this is Donald Trump. He's unpredictable. We'll have to wait and see how this sort of shakes out.
Yeah, and of course, Trump's not backing off on his tariff talk. He doubled down on it, as a matter of fact, during that impromptu news conference.
He says he loves tariffs. He likes tariffs. The goal for Canada is to dangle something attractive and give him a win, so that if he has to remove his tariffs, that he can still claim victory. He can show the American people, or at least his base, what he got in return for those tariffs, to say, I won, look at what I got. And that's what the conversation's happening, at least from the Canadian side right now.
What might that look like? What would represent a win?
Well, I think, a lot of the discussion has been maybe a little bit more U.S. content in autos, possibly a deal on critical minerals, because critical minerals are really important. They can be used for a variety of different things, especially in electronics, in the defense sector. And Canada is rich with critical minerals, and some critical minerals you can't get, many other places around the world. China is another place that is rich in critical minerals, but right now trade with China is not the greatest with the U.S. They're having their own talks to have some sort of deal. So Canada would probably want to get in there first, so that we can secure more access for our critical minerals, while also making sure, there was a report that went out that said that the U.S. was looking for right of first refusal rights for critical minerals from Canada. I'm not quite sure that would be something that would go over well with the Canadian government, but we'll see again how this shakes out and what Donald Trump can claim as a victory.
What else substantive might come out of this summit with other leaders? Anything that you're looking at for?
Well, we got a joint statement late last night after most people had already left the media center on the de-escalation front for the conflict in the Middle East. There wasn't a lot of hope that they would get a consensus, but I guess things had changed throughout the day as Donald Trump decided to go back, that he signed off on it in the end to call for a de-escalation. So that was, I guess, a bit of a victory to have consensus there, but consensus was not expected at this. There were very low expectations that we would get all the leaders on board. And I'll say, just because Trump is gone doesn't mean there's not a U.S. presence here. They have officials. They have others who have been working at this for some time, people called Sherpas, who sort of help guide their country's positioning through the whole planning process. And they're still here to try and work out issues with the other countries. So we'll see what happens. Russia-Ukraine is going to be a big conversation today. But again, there's low expectations that the U.S. would sign on to any further commitments to try and help Ukraine. The Ukrainian-Canadian Congress tells me they're looking for more military aid, sanctions, financial aid to try and help defend against the Russian invasion better, but also maybe possibly push Russia a little bit closer to a peace deal. So we're not expecting anything there. It's kind of interesting because the word has been that maybe we won't get a classic communique where all leaders sign on. You'll remember at the G7 in Charlevoix in Quebec, there was a communique with Donald Trump, and then he flew off and tweeted that he didn't want to do it anymore and had some nasty words for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So that can also be risky, even if you get the U.S. to sign on, whether they're going to stay signed on. I think Trump is a little bit distracted right now with that conflict. So we'll see what happens with the communique in the end, but it could just end up being Mark Carney putting out a statement to sort of recap what went over, and then there might be some side agreements between a fewer number of the G7 countries on separate matters where they all agree on, such as Russia and Ukraine.
Okay, how about Mark Carney in general and his performance, I suppose, if we could use that term? Did he appear comfortable or Or does he like the world stage? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he does appear comfortable. I mean, this is his first hosting summit for the world stage, so it was going to be interesting to see how he did on this. But he seemed to be performing well. He seems comfortable with dealing with the other world leaders. I mean, he's not brand new to this idea, to these sorts of summits. As former central banker for Canada and England, he's been to a lot of international summits before. He's had to stick handle a lot of this stuff, and his private sector experience as well. Sitting around a boardroom. In some ways, these sorts of meetings can be similar to that. So far, no big missteps, no mistakes. He seems to be handling it well. There were some issues with the timing of everything yesterday. Things kind of got off the rails, but that's because that meeting with President Donald Trump seemed to go a lot longer than expected. It went over an hour when you looked at the private meeting between the two leaders and then the expanded meeting with all of the officials. So that went a lot longer, and then a couple of other leaders ended up going long too. So the timing was a bit of an issue yesterday, but that's a small thing. And usually at these summits, small things end up just derailing a lot of the plans. So that's not unheard of, even for experienced prime ministers and politicians.
Cormac, great work as always. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again.
Anytime.
All right, take care. Cormac Mac Sweeney, our parliamentary reporter. Who owns an EV in Canada? 3 provinces dominate EV registrations. We'll discuss this when we come back. All right, I saw this story on the CBC website this week. Who owns an EV in Canada? 3 provinces dominate EV registrations. Suburbs may be the sweet spot in terms of needing a vehicle and having options to charge. Joining us to talk about all this is Cara Clairman, CEO Plug and Drive. Cara, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you, Todd.
All right, tell us what's Plug and Drive all about.
So Plug and Drive is a nonprofit, and we're all about EV education. We bring the education to you. We're traveling the country in a mobile road show, bringing cars along so people can test drive and learn all about EVs with no pressure to buy anything.
Okay, and I assume you'll be coming out to our region as well?
We are. We're coming in August. We're going to be there for a couple of weeks, August 7 to 24. We'll be set up in Dartmouth.
All right. What's your mandate? Why do you do what you do?
Well, we do it just to help consumers get on board. I'm the founder, so really started it for climate change reasons. EVs provide a huge emission reduction, and most people just haven't had a chance to really learn about them and realize that they could incorporate it into their life relatively easily. And also it helps consumers save money, so it's sort of like a win-win. They're much, much cheaper to operate than gas cars, and so just trying to help consumers learn, try, and hopefully eventually buy.
Okay, so what's the data telling us when it comes to who's buying EVs and some of the demographics and the regions and some of that stuff?
Sure. Well, in the early days, it did tend to be wealthier people because most of the cars that were available were quite expensive. But it's changed quite a bit because the prices have come down, and of course, gas cars have gotten more and more expensive. So it's much closer than it used to be in terms of cost. But you would notice if you look at the data that the adoption is much, much higher in Quebec and British Columbia. They've exceeded 20% new car sales, which sort of is like what people consider the tipping point. And so the reason for that is they have really good incentives in those provinces, and they also have something called ZEV mandate, which is the automakers are required to sell by law a certain percentage of EVs if they're selling a certain percentage of gas cars.
Is there not a federal mandate in play though already?
Well, it's on the books, but it hasn't been implemented yet. But assuming it stays in, it will be implemented next year, 2026.
Okay. Do you think why has it not been implemented? What do you mean by implemented? Explain that.
Well, they gave the law that they proposed gave time for the automakers to, adjust to it. And so it didn't require any changes until 2026. And when people sort of talk about it, just to clarify what it means, what it just means is that automakers need to have the EVs on the lot. And so it actually gives consumers more choice, not less. Sometimes you hear folks talking about it as if it's restricting choice, like only it's going to restrict you from buying a gas car. That's not it. It just requires each dealer to have a certain number of EVs on the lot so that people can see them and try them.
All right. So is there any concern that it won't be implemented based on what we're seeing in the United States?
Yes, there is some concern. Some of the automakers have been, quite vocal against it, given what's happening in the United States. However, there's still plenty of reason to keep it. Many of the brands, actually, the majority of the brands of EV do not come from the United States, and so they aren't affected by the tariffs. Kia and Hyundai, for example, both, come straight from South Korea. Volkswagen can come straight from Germany. Like, there's a lot of brands where the tariff is not relevant. And so, our view is we hope it will stay.
What about Chinese EVs? That tariff's highly relevant at 100%.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. We don't have any Chinese EVs in Canada yet. The reality is, eventually we will. I mean, there's probably very little anyone can do about it. Even with the 100% tariff, they're still cheaper than the other brands. So eventually you're going to see them. We just don't see them yet.
Wow, the Chinese, I've heard, really have really zeroed in on how to make EVs. Is that true?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Apparently, well, I was fortunate enough to see a couple of them when I was in Norway a few years back, and very high quality and very low price. So I think that's part of the reason a lot of OEMs do not want to see them here, because they know they're really good. And I think in a way it's similar to what happened when the Japanese cars first came. There was a lot of fear that it was going to destroy the auto market. But what it did was it made the American auto brands better. And, that's probably the same as what will happen here.
What are some misconceptions about EVs that you'd like to clarify?
Oh, thanks for that opportunity, Todd. Well, the first thing is everyone thinks an EV is too expensive. And if you really look, you'll see that there are many brands in the exact same ballpark as gas cars, and they are much, much cheaper to run. If you think about the cost of gas right now, it's probably hovering in your region around $1.40, $1.50 a liter, and I'm paying the equivalent of 28 cents a liter at night at home. And so that's my electricity price. That's about the difference. It's about 1/5 to 1/6 the price of gas. And so you just have to do a little bit of math to figure out that even if you pay a little bit more for the vehicle, you are going to be in the money over time. So that's the biggest one. And then the other one is people forget about used. There is a lot of availability in used EVs, very affordable, and of course the savings will still be there.
All right, there's concern about used and warranty though with the batteries and very expensive repairs. Again, this could be a misnomer. What's your advice when it comes to that?
It is a bit of a myth, and what I can tell you is all the studies are showing the batteries are likely to last longer than the car. The batteries are not crapping out. And so chances are your battery is going to last 20 years. So it's unlikely you'll ever have to replace it. What I recommend, though, is that if you are looking at used, if you buy it less than 8 years old, the warranty on the battery is usually 8 years. So you just check for the brand how many years the warranty is. And if you buy it at year 6, you got 2 years left on the warranty. And then you're safe if there should be a problem. And there's also a test you can do on the battery to make sure. I mean, it's not impossible to get a lemon, right? In any car, that can happen. So I recommend people do a state of health test on the battery before they buy a used EV, and pretty much any dealer should be able to provide that.
All right. If people want to know more about Plug and Drive, they can check you out online, right? No doubt.
Absolutely, and they can look at our events page and see where we're going to be when. Like I said, we'll be in Dartmouth in August, and we're traveling across the country. So if you're in a different location, happy to see you anywhere on our route. And you know, we have all kinds of good information online if you're not near one of our test drives, and hope you'll just keep an open mind and consider it.
Okay, Cara, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, take care.
For the opportunity.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Cara Clairman, CEO of Plug and Drive. More surgeries performed, but wait time still longer than before the pandemic, according to a study. We'll discuss this when we come back.
Stop by Sherwin-Williams and get 30% off select paints and stains June 13th through the 23rd. It's the perfect time to transform your space with color. Refresh your home inside and out with colors that make every space feel brand new. From cozy interiors to stunning exteriors, we've got the perfect shade for your next project. Shop the sale online or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
The Canadian Institute for Health Information says more surgeries are being performed than before the pandemic, but wait times have still grown longer. The report released recently looked at wait times for hip knee replacements, cataract procedures, cancer surgeries, MRIs, and CT scans in 2019 and in 2024. Ann Atkinson joins us, Project Lead Health Systems Analytics with the Canadian Institute for Health Information. Ann, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you. Thank you for your interest in our report.
For sure. I guess, first of all, it might seem evident but obvious, but why is this important information for the public to know?
First of all, because so they're aware of the challenges within the health system, but also with the many solutions that are being implemented, which is the reason for the increased amount of surgeries that were done, especially in Nova Scotia. Many more surgeries were completed. And so this would help them understand why the wait times are still long, why they're still waiting, especially for these priority procedures.
All right, so let's address that. Why?
So across Canada, managing wait times for surgery and diagnostic imaging remains a priority. But provinces have been experiencing so many challenges. We hear reports of the demand from a growing and aging population, health workforce shortages, especially specialists and nurses, limited room in the operating rooms, many patients with much more complex conditions. So all of it happening at once. In Nova Scotia in particular, we hear that you're experiencing rapid population growth, at the same time struggling with high vacancy rates among anesthesiologists, surgical nurses. So all of this takes time, even though they have been able to complete many more surgeries. You also have a greater proportion of older people who need these procedures. So the report helps people understand the increasing demands, because this, even with more surgeries, there's still not enough space for all the demand. Patients in hospital beds are waiting for residential placement. So there's all these factors that are happening at the same time.
All right. So so how do we tackle these and get some solutions?
No, absolutely. Thanks, Todd. Well, in Nova Scotia, there's quite a bit of positive news. So provincial health systems across the country are trying to increase their capacity as fast as possible to meet all the wait time targets for these surgeries. So as you saw, there's many more surgeries being performed in 2024, but the capacity is still strained. Our provincial partners tell us in Nova Scotia that you're implementing centralized access so that these all continue, one point of entry for the whole province, improving monitoring patients on a wait list so that patients can be prioritized. You've been establishing alternative clinics using outpatient and day surgery to be able to complete more surgeries. A lot of work continues to strengthen referral pathways and collaboration among different healthcare professionals. And also, there's quite a bit of investment to increase the health workforce. So all of that is happening, and just trying to meet the demand as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and that's the real challenge, right? As we continue to age, and as the population expands, in particular here in Nova Scotia, in particular here in Halifax, that
yes.
It really requires not only human resources but also infrastructure upgrades and expansion as well.
Absolutely, and that was one of our partners, and even one of our provider partners has mentioned quite a bit that it's very difficult to find the operating room space. Also in Nova Scotia, there's been tremendous effort to increase many surgeries, and there's been quite an increase also in hip fracture repair, which is an emergency service, whereas the other procedures are elective. And so that's going to take up operating space too, and staff, absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, none of these solutions can happen in a hurry, and we know that look, it's the public is frustrated, in particular people who are on these wait lists are frustrated, but there's no magic wand here. There's no magic bullet, right?
No, absolutely. It takes time. And you're right. There's certainly better waitlist management coming part. Certainly in our data, we see that Nova Scotia has improved in many areas. Definitely hip replacement, knee replacement, cataract surgery, lung cancer. People are waiting less. But then in some other areas, they're having more difficulty, like for bladder cancer surgery or prostate cancer surgery. Even though they've done like 25% more surgeries in those areas as well. But yeah, that's going to take more time.
How about the private sector, and that is an option for some people? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, our report speaks to the combination of factors which we've been working on, and certainly speaks to the dramatic increase in that the system is trying to look at alternative settings and clinics, and just trying to do all they can. In Nova Scotia, the volume of cataract surgeries significantly went up, and also the days that people waited for cataract surgery went down. So that's a pretty good news.
No, but again, is there room for the private sector and private clinics here to because there's two schools of thought. First is, of course, that they take away from the public system, and when it comes to human resources, but others would say that, look, if it's better than waiting on a wait list, if you can afford to go get a knee replaced at a private clinic and stop your suffering, then so be it. What are your thoughts on all that? Anything?
Well, certainly what we have learned from our provincial partners and also our patient partners is that the system is trying to balance both of those. And you've identified those areas, is that when we go too far into that sector, we lose a lot of health workforce because there's only so many that we can share, so many surgeons and nurses. But on the other hand, it does help. And you can see that with cataract surgeries. The ministry, the provincial partners tell us that they are examining it and working, and so more over time we'll see more answers to that question.
All right. So, Anne, is this information, this report's available for the public, I'm assuming?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, they can check it out online at your website?
CIHI.ca.
Okay, Anne, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Todd. Thank
All right,
you.
take care. Anne Atkinson, Project Lead Health Systems Analytics at the Canadian Institute for Health Information. How much money do you need to retire? We'll talk about this with Ken Shea when we come back. All right, before my chat with Ken Shea, all week we're giving away tickets to a great event coming up, the Golden Girls, the last continue at the Rebecca Cohen, September 26th through the 28th. If you'd like a pair of tickets, will be callers 6 now at 902-405-6000. Again, caller 6 gets these tickets at 902-405-6000. The Golden Girls, the last continue, Rebecca Cohen, September 26th through the 28th. If you'd like a pair of tickets, caller 6 now, 902-405-6000. Good luck. All right, how much money do you need to retire? This story I saw on the CTV website, $1 million is what some people are suggesting would be the benchmark. To help answer that question is Ken Shea of the East Coast Credit Union. Of course, Ken Shea, welcome to the show again.
Hey, Todd. Glad to be here. Good morning.
All right. So that's the big question that I'm sure you get asked, and you and your staff work on a daily basis, right?
And it was interesting that the number's really gone up since I think 20 years ago they did the survey and they said it was around 500,000 and now it's 1 million. And even the 500,000 in today's dollars would be a lot less than $1 million. So it's interesting the numbers changed quite dramatically over the last 20 years. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think people would like to have a higher standard of living when they move into retirement. So they're planning maybe to spend a little bit more money in retirement. Right now, I guess if you've watched statistics over the last 20 years, you've seen that people tend to live a little bit longer than they did maybe 20 years ago, and that seems to be going up each year a little bit. And so that means that your money has to last a little bit longer. And obviously, a lot of the generation today are kind of in this process where they have to support the next generation, as well as maybe aging parents. So they're kind of the first generation that's had those dynamics go on. So that's having a bit of an impact too on that number, I think.
All right. How do defined benefit pensions kind of weigh in on this, and how do they factor in on that number, or do they?
Well, I think they do, and I think it's interesting to bring that up because I think a lot more people maybe in the past had, or it was more popular for some to have defined benefits. And I think more and more employers and organizations are moving away from them and putting more back in the hands of individuals to plan. So instead of having that kind of a guaranteed income, they have an income that's based on what they've got in their investment accounts, which can be a little bit scarier because there's, especially in times like we're going through right now, where there's a lot of economic uncertainty, differences in inflation and turmoil, that's creating maybe a sense of angst with people that are a little more concerned about it because it's not as simple as you get a certain number when you retire. And I think there was a recent survey that was done on the Globe and Mail was posted today talking about how over half of people are concerned about their ability to produce the proper retirement income when they retire, and a lot of that's driven by anxiety and concern over the economy and, the forward-looking things because of the economic turmoil that's happening in the markets today and the reliance on other things besides defined benefit pensions to help fund retirement.
I would think a good, solid defined benefit pension plan would be worth. I mean, obviously it depends on the situation, but if you're a federal government worker or retired Navy or whatever, which would be applicable to a lot of people listening here in the province, or a teacher or whatever. Yeah. That is well in excess of $1 million if you were to monetize it all. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. Those are definitely gold-plated plans, but I think they are certainly worth a lot of money for the individuals that are getting them. But there's lots of ways that people can prepare themselves, I think, to be ready for retirement. Like, really, I think it comes down to understanding your own individual situation, looking at what percentage of your overall retirement income is going to come from, say, government benefits like CPP and OAS, which typically for most people form a fairly significant part of their retirement income, which is a kind of like the gold-plated defined benefit pension, because once you start drawing those, they stay in place and continue to grow with inflation, just like your regular defined benefit pension. And they do make up a percentage of everyone's retirement, depending on how much other funding you require when you retire and what your income level was. They can be a third or sometimes more than that in your overall picture. Obviously, if you do have a pension, you want to make sure you include that. If it's a defined benefit, then you know exactly what you're going to get. If it's a defined contribution or RRSP matching plan or something with your employer, understanding, the value of that, what are the options you have to produce income with that. And then there's other investments, whether it's TFSAs, other outside investments, if you've been able to garner those. Some people have rental properties, some people have other investments that they can use to create income. And all those things you want to weigh into your kind of overall picture when you're heading into retirement. So I think it's really important that people kind of look at all their sources of income and kind of really look at their plan, especially when they're uncertain about what the future looks like.
What advice do you have when it comes to CPP and whether to start drawing it at 60 years old or wait till you're 65, or is there no rule of thumb there?
I think the rule of thumb is if you need the money, you should take it. But other than that, I think it really boils down to your own personal financial situation. If you've had a higher income and you're getting the full value of those, and you have other assets that can help you put off taking those retirement benefits, there's a substantial benefit to delaying, because you get, I think it's like 6% per year, so an extra 30% on your Canada pension, and a similar. It's a little bit less on OAS, but you get a similar kind of increase and a bit of a decrease if you have to take earlier. So if they can be put off, if your health is good, and you look at how people are living longer, it means that you're going to be getting a larger income for a longer period of time if you do live with the normal statistics. So I think but it does really depend on an individual situation. Some people have been successful at saving, and so have maybe a little bit more of a nest egg when they enter retirement, and maybe they want to use that first and then rely on pension to support them in their later years. And that's certainly a good strategy. But I think really what it boils down to is reviewing kind of your own situation with a professional and trying to make sure you map that out. One of the downsides to the CPP and OAS is once you do choose to take it, you can't really change that decision. So you can't take it for a year and then reverse. Once you do, you're in. So it does, I think, make sense to at least review that with someone to get a second opinion and make sure that if you're thinking that it's time to take it, that you're doing the right thing based on your own individual situation. The other thing that's interesting about retirement planning is a lot of people think that you're going to need the same amount of income every year until death, and that typically isn't true for retirees. So a lot of financial planners these days are looking at, different phases of retirement. So you have maybe what they call the go-go phase. So when you first retire, you're probably going to want to do more travel. You're probably going to want to do the things that you haven't been able to do as a non-retiree. And you tend to spend a little bit more money in those first, 5 to 10 years because you're trying to get all those things done that are on your bucket list. And then you have kind of a slow go phase as you get a little bit older. Maybe travel and some of these things that are costing more aren't as necessary or aren't as easy. So you probably are spending a little less money than what you would have when you first retired. And then the no-go phase, when you get a little bit older, you're not really traveling, you're not doing some of those things, and you're just really needing the funds to kind of make sure that you're living a comfortable life in your situation. And so you tend to spend the least amount of money in probably the last few years, but then that's when healthcare costs and stuff sometimes rise. So you got to kind of make sure you balance out what you've got left for those kind of things as well. But planning that it's always going to need to be the same amount in many cases may cause you to save more money than what you maybe needed. So just trying to make sure that you've done a proper plan, I think, is really important for people when they're considering retirement. Well,
I think saving more than you need is better than not saving as much as you need, right?
Absolutely, Todd. You want to be on that side of that equation for sure. And that's the other thing that I think is happening with all the uncertainty in the situation these days with the economy and, higher inflation, cost of housing, living in general. I think people are more concerned about running out of money, which is a legitimate concern. But again, I think understanding what your sources of retirement income are going to be, making sure that you have a good idea of how they all fit together, when's the right time to take the various benefits, whether it's OAS, CPP, when to cash in your retirement savings to make sure that you're getting the best tax advantage. All those things can help to make sure that you have a comfortable or more affordable retirement, and it really does pay to talk to somebody that understands how those different dynamics work to make sure that you've got the right advice when you're getting ready.
How about your home as part of the equation, as part of net worth? How does that factor in?
It certainly can be a factor, and a lot of retirees plan to either downsize or maybe move out of their home and into a smaller apartment or something as they retire because they don't need the space. The kids are growing up and et cetera. But a number of retirees also stay in their home. So I think if you're planning to stay in your home, you may not want to count it as part of your retirement savings because you're going to stay there and use it as part of your living accommodations, and it can reduce your cost of living because you're not paying rent on a place, but you've got your home. If you've paid your mortgage off and all you're paying is your property taxes and some other bills to kind of keep you there, that might be a lot less than moving to an apartment, for instance. So trying to balance between the two. But I think if you are planning to incorporate it in your financial plan, you have to be sure that you're willing to part with it, I guess, is the thing. So you got to be willing to look at how you're going to deal with what you're going to do if you don't have your home anymore, i.e. if you're going to downsize or if you're going to move to some other living arrangement. What's the cost of that? Making sure that's incorporated in your financial plan. Yeah,
of course, owning a house can be very expensive when it comes to upkeep and repairs as well, and that's got to factor in. Lawn care and snow removal and on it goes. We all know anybody who owns a home will tell you it's an endless battle to try and maintain a house, right?
Yeah, both the minor maintenance, like you say, lawn care, snow clearing, but also the major systems, like, every 10 or 15 years you need a new roof, something else goes on the house, and usually they're not small things or inexpensive things. So trying to make sure you get a little bit in your budget for those contingencies that could happen if you're planning to stay in your home and use it as part of your retirement nest. You might want to make sure you've incorporated in some of those potential costs over the long haul as well, so that you get some maintenance costs built into your formula.
Okay, Ken, very informative. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
All right. Thanks, Todd.
All right, pal. Take care. You got it. Ken Shea with the East Coast Credit Union. Very informative for sure. All right, folks, what's on your mind today? The way to reach us for the open hour is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Perhaps you've heard something discussed on the show that you'd like to weigh in on, or perhaps something that you think should be discussed on the show that you'd like to weigh in on or have your opinion heard. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Give us a call. One of the things that caught my attention was a story on the Global News website this morning. Some members of HRM Council are taking issue with the province weighing in on municipal issues. Last week, the Premier sided with the city's mayor on his motion calling for all bike lane construction to be halted. Now, some are wondering how far provincial overreach will go between Houston's government and the mayor, Andy Fillmore. Councillor Sean Cleary said it feels like the Premier wants to run Halifax while others call it undemocratic. Catherine Morris is one of those voices that suggests that it's undemocratic. Do you agree with the councillor? Should the Premier stay out of HRM's business, or do you like his candid comments? Refreshing, and is this perhaps an example of a thin-skinned council? Give us a call, 902-405-6000, whatever's on your mind. We'll take your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. This on the Global News website this morning. Some members of HRM Council are taking issue with the province weighing in on municipal issues. Last week, the Premier sided with the city's mayor on his motion calling for bike lane construction to be halted. Now, some are wondering how far provincial overreach will go between Houston's government and the mayor, Andy Fillmore. Councillor Sean Cleary says it feels like the Premier wants to run Halifax, while others call it undemocratic. Here's a quote from Catherine Morris. Catherine says it's really an undemocratic development because many of HRM's plans were developed with the public at public hearings or doing public consultations. So when the province steps in and overrules, they're really overruling residents of HRM. So one of the questions that I'll ask you to consider to weigh in on today is, do you agree with the Two councillors, Sean Cleary and Catherine Morris. Should the Premier stay out of HRM's business? Or do you like this candid approach and his comments and weighing in on this? Is it refreshing? Is it an example of perhaps a thin-skinned council? What are your thoughts on that, folks? 902-405-6000. From my vantage point, I like a candid politician who's willing to express opinion because it's good for our business, right? And perhaps it's okay to have the Premier criticizing or perhaps approving or applauding a move the council makes or the mayor makes. And years ago, of course, the Premier likely would not have done this. Whichever Premier of the province we were talking with, Steve McNeil or others, they generally stayed out of this type of policy, municipal policy. But that we're in a different era of politics now. And what are your thoughts on that? Is it a good thing that the Premier is taking an interest in municipal politics and weighing in on provincial politics? Or rather, municipal politics. 902-405-6000. Also, this on the CBC website today. Nova Scotia Premier says municipalities who want funding must allow economic development after uranium concerns. The Premier sent West Hants, Pictou County, lengthy list of projects and groups that have seen provincial funding. So basically, it's if you're not going to play ball when it comes to our natural resources development policies, well, you could be in jeopardy of losing funding for certain projects. Is that an overreach? Is that appropriate? I guess the argument could be made that if you want to have this type of funding continue, we're going to need to get the money from somewhere. And there's no magic wand here, and developing natural resources will be a long-term economic way of being fiscally prudent and feasible long-term. What are your thoughts on that? Or the G7, Donald Trump left early. Do you care? What do you think about the G7? Are you following it all? Or is it just basically all for show and not really anything substantive coming out of this? 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with Mike. Hello, Mike.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. Just two quick issues. On the councillors complaining about supposed provincial overreach, the Premier, I think we should look at Toronto as a cautionary tale where the province has had to go in and bail out that city on a couple of occasions because of massive overspending by mayor and council in Toronto. I would suggest their Premier, since he agreed with the mayor's motion, is concerned about how our elected representatives in Halifax spend our money. And the councillors are forgetting. HRM is a creature of the provincial legislature. I think the province, aka the Premier, has every right to eye and comment upon some policies in HRM, as he probably doesn't want HRM councillors knocking on the provincial coffers for more of our money. It's just a wider tax base. I think the councillors are being thin-skinned.
Yeah.
And they're playing too much politics on this.
Yeah, and I'm sure the councillors would be quick to criticize the Premier, right?
Well, yeah, they're doing it already.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's the nature of the job.
Yeah.
There's one issue, though, that hasn't come up, and to me it's a public health issue, and it's really become noticeable in Dartmouth, where I live, with all the construction going on Wise Road. We're being inundated by rats. Mm. I mean, you go for a walk down Wise Road or Thistle Street early in the morning, the critters are out on the sidewalks. They're all over the place. And you contact HRM, they have no policy of rat eradication, nor educating the public on how to keep rats off their property. Like, I've just spent over $1,000 to bring an exterminator in on two properties, just not inside the properties, but out on the premises because we have a park next door. I mean, you just see them come walk down the street and through the park like they own the place.
Yeah.
And people, and they got to educate people about garbage and things like that. I mean, you go through anywhere in Halifax, as you know, you run across rats, but there's no policy to eradicate or control them because they are definitely a health issue.
Yeah, I see them in my area for sure, and I've seen them on my property, and they're everywhere. You're absolutely right.
It's a serious health issue. And those are very basic things I think council has to address, even to educate our residents about rats, refuse, garbage bags, chicken coops, all that attracts, and bird feeding attracts these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my rant for that. I apologize. I know it sounds like a bit of a rant. But back to our councillors, I think it's good that the Premier is looking at how we spend our money and what on, because just look what's going on in Toronto.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mike. Good comments.
Okay, you have a great day.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Rob, hello.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Great. So 2 comments. I think the Premier has every right to step in because it's the residents of HRM that want to have their dollars spent to the best bang for their buck. Doug Ford did it in Toronto, and I don't see anything wrong with it. To me, it sends a signal to council. If you can't do the job, we're going to step in and we're going to start to work with you people and not against you. And if you work against us, we'll take the whole thing over. I mean, council's got to understand, you know what? You got to work together. Maybe the province has better ways, or maybe they can get things done quicker. So I would say to the councillors, stop being so thick-skinned. And as for the G7s, if you really watch how Trump and Carney get along now, I listened to them this morning. Mark and I had a great conversation. And even though we might not agree with each other, he says he has some good points. Where before everything was about Trudeau, and so you can just see how the whole temperature has been calmed down. And with Mr. Carney's experience, even Trump, I think, is beginning to learn some things from him.
Yeah, it's interesting though how little things, little subtleties, but how Donald Trump calls the Prime Minister Mark and Carney, of course, calls him Mr. President. There is a difference there, right? And it's a bit of a power move. And Trump is, I think, in control of that situation, and that's just that's the reality of it, right?
Well, it's funny because it would be wise, and it's probably done already, world leaders to have people that do the analysis of people, how they act, how they behave, how they tilt their heads. Because with Trump, all you got to do is tell him he's a nice guy, he's the best thing since sliced bread, pat him on the back, his ego goes way up, and you know what? He loves that, and the Prime Minister is doing exactly that, and I think in the end, we're going to get a good deal out of it.
Okay, Rob, appreciate the call.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Jim, hello.
Good morning, Todd.
Hi there.
I'm in support of the Premier on this. I look back when he was first elected in 2021. The city was doing studies on how to build homes for the homeless, and they've been doing those studies for 3 or 4 years. Finally, Houston government came in and said, no, we need to act, and it forced council to act. And then I think, in addition to that, when Andy ran and one of the aldermen, let's say, didn't get the position they wanted, his core group seem to be the ones that are sabotaging city council these days. So it's easy to blame other people, places, and things when it's not going your way. And it's interesting. I listened on Monday to your councillors, and for the last several Mondays, and every time a question comes up that's a little tricky, we're going to go to staff for a report. Where's the action from the council? Todd, that's my comment.
Okay, Jim, appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. And look, I would agree that deferring to staff is the common response. There are times when that's an appropriate response, for sure. It's never always one thing or the other. But it seems to be a pretty steady theme since I've been hosting this show, and that's a number of years now. And certainly Rick was the same, that oftentimes it was deferring to staff when it comes to answering tough questions. Again, there are times when that's appropriate, but I think that there are times when it becomes a crutch. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. Way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Here's an email from Mike. Says, I would like to know the context surrounding Premier Houston's remarks about bike lanes and HRM. Did he just offer his unsolicited opinion, or was he responding to a question? Overall, I have no big issue with someone offering an opinion. After all, we have freedom of speech, and Sean Cleary doesn't take criticism well. And I'm not sure of the context. To be quite honest, I'm just reading the Global News story this morning. And again, for those just tuning in, some members of HRM Council are taking issue with the province weighing in on municipal issues. Last week, the Premier sided with the city's mayor on his motion calling for bike lane construction to be halted. Now, some are wondering how far provincial overreach will go between Houston's government and the mayor. Sean Cleary, who will join the show on Thursday, by the way, said it feels like the Premier wants to run Halifax. Others call it undemocratic. So the question that I'm asking is, do you agree with Cleary that the Premier should stay out of HRM's business? Or do you like the Premier's comments, and do you think that it's completely appropriate? And I'm not sure of the context, but that's a good question. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. You can talk about that or whatever else you'd like to get into. Again, 902-405-6000. Len, hello.
Good morning, Todd. Todd, it's a beautiful day today.
Yeah, indeed.
And I must admit, it is a very good suggestion by the Premier to give his opinion. He has all the right to give his opinion. He's a member of he's a citizen of Nova Scotia and a citizen of, I think he lives in the Halifax Regional, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he's from Pictou County. He lives in Pictou County.
Oh, he's from Pictou County.
Yeah.
That's right. You're right. I'm sorry. But anyway, and I think it would be a great idea if the province did run the city of Halifax. Because can you imagine we eliminate all these people that are in council that do absolutely nothing for the 4 years that they're in, or 3 years, and we have all these people that are backbenchers in the provincial government that are in for 4 years. They could handle a lot of these episodes that happen in the city, and it would save the province and the city a lot of money by not having city councils and mayors and all this, when the province could handle it. But as far as the mayor weighing in on this particular issue of the bike lanes, I think all the power to him, and I think he's absolutely right in giving his opinion. And another thing I'd like to add to this is, did the city ever think about bike lanes being added to the side of the sidewalks like it's done in Europe? And have they ever discussed anything like that, which would make it a lot safer for bikers and people? So that's my opinion for today, Todd.
Okay, Len, appreciate it. Take care at 902-405-6000. I don't agree with eliminating municipal council and mayors and allow the provincial government to take care of it all. But that said, the question of the day, of course, is should the mayor or should the Premier be weighing in on municipal issues like this issue with this motion from Andy Fillmore, in which the Premier supported. And again, Sean Cleary and Catherine Morris took issue with that, saying that he shouldn't be involved and it's undemocratic. Do you agree or disagree? 902-405-6000. You can get into that or whatever else you'd like to get into. Tim, hello.
Morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. On the issue between the province and council, it just sounds like there's some egos getting bruised, and we'll see how it all works out. But that's not why I'm calling.
Okay.
In regards to Mr. Trump, we've always heard the law is the law, and I'm just not sure how a convicted felon gets to go back and forth over the border of Canada without being questioned or detained. I know he's president, but at the end of the day, if that was you and I, and we had a conviction on our record, there's probably a very good chance we don't get to access Canada or go into the United States. I'm just wondering why, other than, yes, I recognize he's president of the United States, how he's able to flow both ways without some sort of consequence.
Well, I think you answered your question, because he is who he is. That's the only reason. If not for that, he wouldn't be.
I understand, but we've always been told nobody's above the law. And that being said, if he's president of the United States and you believe that nobody's above the law, then he should have been questioned, concerned, or detained, or not allowed access. It's just a mixed message to people who've been convicted that, yes, you can go back and forth. And yes, if there's a precedent set, now can somebody else go back and forth? I suspect there's somebody at the airport right now getting detained or questioned about it. But at the end of the day, it's just, it's a shame because depending on what he's done or hasn't done, but what he's been convicted of, you see officials walking around there yesterday in Kananaskis, not one person or anybody in authority questioned or detained him.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate the call. Take care, 902-405-6000. James, hello.
Hi, thanks. Quickly on two topics. Rats. It's a public health issue, as you, in fact, personally expressed. It's not just on private property. They're out and about. And so I think HRM needs a, quote, strategy very quickly developed, not hugely complicated, but there should be action taken by the municipality to try to either help individual residents where there's a concentration or plant some traps in public areas. Anyway, it's a public health issue, and so it's time to take the burden off individuals. On a different topic, the traffic congestion in Halifax, have a sort of different idea, but it's not totally wild. Free public transit, at least in certain areas of HRM, the areas where people are just getting in their car in suburbia, driving to downtown Halifax to go to work, reverse at the end of the day. There are many cities in the world that do this. Perth, Australia, the South Shore of Montreal, Chambly, Quebec, and other neighboring municipalities. It's not a wild idea because it gets people out of their cars, which is good for traffic congestion, but of course it's also good for greenhouse gas emissions. Anyway, just planting a seed. Maybe you can get some experts on about that idea. The budget of HRM is about $1.3 billion per annum, and the budget of Halifax Transit is $60 million per annum, included in the HRM budget. And you don't have to do free everywhere. You can do it just on the routes or in the areas where it will have the maximum impact of getting cars off the road.
Okay, James, appreciate your comments. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right,
Bye.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Here's a quick email from Carlos. Carlos says, regardless of Cleary's political affiliation, municipal governments are empowered under provincial legislation. Overseeing the act, the Premier has every right to state his views on municipal issues. That impacts about half of the provincial population and how each municipality operates. Comes from Carlos. What are your thoughts on this, folks? Sean Cleary and Catherine Morris have taken issue with the fact that the Premier has weighed in on the bike lane situation, siding with the Mayor's motion, calling for bike lane construction to be halted. Now, Sean Cleary and Catherine Morris call this undemocratic. Do you agree or disagree? 902-405-6000, or you can talk about whatever else you'd like. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Before I go back to the phones, I'm going to read an email or two. This one from Jason. Jason says, many people are saying Trump is inadmissible because he's a convicted felon. The immigration system has always allowed what is called ministerial relief or ministerial instructions. If a guy named Donald Trump asked to visit, he'd be denied entry based on his criminal record. But if the elected president of the United States wants to come, the long-standing ministerial relief policy is going to be used. And what possible benefit would it be to Canada to deny entry to the person who Americans elected as their representative? Interesting comment there. Rob says there's nothing undemocratic about the Premier voicing his opinion. The last time I checked, HRM is within Nova Scotia, and the Premier's party was democratically elected to represent all of Nova Scotia. 902-405-6000, that is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's get into this. Let's talk to Wade. Wade's a first-time caller. Hello, Wade.
Good day, guys. How are you?
We're well.
My first thing is Sean Clary may get a couple little bruises, but we all know he's a bike advocate. So anybody that would say anything against bike lanes and those kind of things, even the premier would definitely irk him for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting because if the premier were against what the mayor put forward, probably Sean Clary wouldn't be complaining about it, right?
You're absolute. That's my opinion as well.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem with bike lanes in this city is the city council has no vision. There's no vision. There's been many, on the outskirts, many areas where they did all kinds of subdivisions and various building. There was no provisions put in for bike lanes when the roads were put in. There's no vision. So here we are trying to play catch up on narrow streets where most places in Halifax where the buildings are very close to the road and there's really no room to put bike lanes. But, it's crazy that they would spend $93 million or whatever it is on bike lanes, but me as a homeowner have to wait till July 21st for me to put weekly garbage for my green bin, and then they're going to cut it off 2 weeks early on the end. You know what? I think they should do a plebiscite. Do a plebiscite in Halifax if that's what you want to do, and see what the people say, because, I talk to people all the time, and I'll tell you, there's very few people in favor of bike lanes.
Okay, Wade, appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Carlos, hello.
Hi, Todd. How are you doing?
I'm well, you?
Good. So, first of all, the premier has the right to give his opinion. What is this? There is nothing undemocratic about this. He didn't push any legislative, did he? No, he did not. He just talked about it, made heifers, and that was it. I have zero problem with that. Regarding the consultation that you hear some councillor referring to, well, this was at a different price tag. There was no consultation at all with the new price tag. Did they go back to the district and say, okay, let's have a town hall on this or something? None of them did. Zero consultation at that level of price tag. So I guess I have to say thank you, Mr. Premier, for speaking on the average Haligonian. And that's it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's an excellent point, actually. How much was any public consultation done when the price tag walloped to $90+ million, and not to my knowledge. So
absolutely
yep. So that's a good point, Carlos. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. David, hello.
Good day. How are you?
I'm well. You?
Good. Quick answer to your initial question. I agree with the lion's share of your callers and emailers. The nature of the Premier's position gives him every right to intervene in municipal matters. It's a matter of law. But that said, I was watching the G7 intensely all along.
Yeah.
And it took on a maritime flavor and a heartbeat when Trump did his exit speech. And Peter MacKay come on CPAC immediately thereafter and corrected Trump. And it took me all the way back to your talk show in 2005 when Andrew Crystal was your host during the election.
Yeah.
And Peter MacKay was running for a seat in Parliament. He became Minister of Foreign Affairs, in the 39th Parliament. But I believe you were in New Brunswick. I don't know if you had the job yet, but Tom Young was
Yeah, Tom was hosting, yeah. Tom was hosting at the time.
And I talked to Tom and Crystal at the time in 2005. But the funny part, if you watch the G7 as intensely as I do, I've been preparing for it and arguing with many people throughout it. When Trump did his exit speech, he blamed Justin Trudeau for having Putin booted out of the G8. It simply wasn't true.
It was Harper.
And Carney just stood there like a deer caught in headlights and did not correct him.
Well,
So
David, listen.
Peter MacKay come on to seats back and corrected him.
No, I get that, David. And look, I just think that Carney was in fairness to Carney, not to be an apologist for Mark Carney at all. But Carney is in a difficult situation there because if you correct him, you embarrass Trump, and that's the problem with Donald Trump is that everybody tiptoes around this guy, right? And that's the issue.
Why it comes to your talk show? Was Peter MacKay.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just Peter MacKay who corrected it.
Andrew Crystal would never allow Peter MacKay and I on the same show.
Mm-hmm.
But he would put me on after MacKay was done speaking.
Yeah.
And I immediately saw to your talk show because of that fact alone. In fact, I've blogged about it. It was hilarious to me, and I never talk behind people's backs. And then on Sunday night, Paul Palango, who you speak with quite readily, was singing your praises, and I was chuckling about that. Do you even recognize my voice?
No, I don't, David. Who are you?
David Amos.
Oh, David Amos. Okay, awesome. I get it. I now remember you.
You certainly should.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. So why don't you call more often, David?
Well, I have. You guys wouldn't let me on the air. So this way, I just told you I was David, and I was allowed on.
Well, there you go. We appreciate it, David. Thanks for your call.
Yeah, so now you're shutting me down, right?
Thanks. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. What is on your mind today? We've got open line for you. Again, 902-405-6000. Something that I'm asking you to weigh in on is the fact that the Premier, Tim Houston, sided with the city's mayor on his motion calling for all bike lane construction to be halted, and some members of HRM Council are reading this on the Global News website this morning, are saying that it's undemocratic that he does so. Sean Cleary is one saying that saying the Premier wants to run Halifax. Catherine Morris says it's really an undemocratic development because many of HRM's plans were developed with the public at public hearings or doing public consultation. So when the province steps in and overrules, they're really overruling residents of HRM. Do you agree with that? Do you think that the Premier should stay out of HRM's business, or do you like his comments? Do you think that he has every right to weigh in on this or anything else that he wants to? And is this an example of perhaps a thin-skinned council? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Again, we got some open lines for you folks. Let's see. Let's go back to some emails here for a bit. This one from Mark. Mark, back to the Trump thing. It says anybody can apply to visit other countries even if they have a criminal record. If it's approved, then they can travel. It's not just a Trump thing. Trump was convicted of 34 counts related to document fraud surrounding trying to hide an extramarital affair, not murder. I'm not a big fan of Trump, but the more I listen to callers, the more I believe that Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing. Let's see what else we got here. Judith says undemocratic. Kind of the definition of democracy is expressing one's opinion on issues. That's true. 902-405-6000. Rob says there's nothing undemocratic about the Premier voicing his opinion. The last time I checked, HRM is within Nova Scotia, and the Premier's party was democratically elected to represent all of Nova Scotia. There you go. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Give us a call, folks. Again, we'd like to hear from you. It's mobile line tree as well. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Give us a call, folks. Many of you weighing in on this story that I referenced earlier, and we've been talking about it on the Global News website this morning. I'll just refer to it for those of you who are just tuning in. Some members of HRM Council are taking issue with the province weighing in on municipal issues. Last week, the Premier, Tim Houston, sided with the city's mayor on his motion calling for all bike lane construction to be halted. Now some are wondering how far provincial overreach will go between Houston's government and the mayor, Andy Fillmore. Sean Cleary, who will join the show on Thursday, by the way, 10 o'clock, said it feels like the Premier wants to run Halifax, while others call it undemocratic. What are your thoughts on this, folks? Do you agree with Sean Cleary? Should the Premier stay out of HRM's business, or do you like his comments? Do you find it refreshing? And does it add to the dialogue? And is it an example of a thin-skinned council, perhaps? You can get into that, or the G7 and Donald Trump leaving earlier, or whatever else you'd like to get into. Again, 902-405-6000. Tracy's giving us a call. Hello, Tracy.
Hi there, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
I'm pretty good. I wanted to weigh in on the Tim Houston comments.
Okay.
I'm curious about what those councillors thought when Houston weighed in on the carbon tax when that came out, and he went to bat for Nova Scotia to explain that, or were they happy that he went to bat for us? But now that he's against what they want him to stay in his lane.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? I mean, like I said, if Tim Houston would have said, if he would have denounced the motion by Andy Fillmore, I'm sure they wouldn't have said a peep. So that's a great point.
And I just think, isn't it always best when all our levels of government work together, regardless of party lines or what level of government you're in? I would rather see us all working together towards a common goal and the common good than everybody just work in silos and don't talk to each other. I mean, the idea that bike lanes and the impact on traffic has no impact on the provincial files is ridiculous. Like, weren't we just voted the third worst city in the country for traffic?
Yeah, for congestion.
For congestion, and that has a huge impact on tourism. It has an impact on provincial initiatives around recruiting other professionals. So those are definitely things of interest to Houston, and bike lanes and how the municipality manages those traffic issues has an impact on provincial stuff. And for the democratic piece, all of these folks were voted in a democratic process. So there's nothing undemocratic about it, and I just think people need to be open to others' opinions and work together.
Yeah, and I think as somebody mentioned via email earlier that look, how much public consultation has been done since the price tag's gone from $25 million to $100 million, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, one of your earlier callers suggested a plebiscite, I think. I love that idea. I'd like to have an actual vote and find out what people really think about these bike lanes.
Yeah, my only issue with the plebiscite is it's very the cost associated with it, and I'm not sure how much participation there would be. I think perhaps, but I get it. But thanks for the call, Tracy.
All right, thanks very much.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Look, for a plebiscite, I think that is a last resort because of the expense, and we elect council to govern, and they have their 4 years to govern. And look, you have the opportunity to oust them at the end of the 4 years. And Sean Cleary could easily say, "Look, obviously I'm doing something right because I keep getting reelected." And other councillors who support this, like Sam Austin, could say the same thing. You could say, "Look, I keep getting reelected." So obviously, there's something to be said for that. Nick, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
Good. Just wanted to chime in on this Tim Houston comment. Just the facts. The facts of the matter are the province is the mother and HRM is the child. The Municipal Government Act is a provincial act. The municipality and all municipalities in Nova Scotia are governed under it. And if the province has something to say as mother hen, then they should be listened to.
Yeah, so you don't see it as undemocratic at all in any way, shape, or form, Nick?
No, it is democracy because the province governs the municipality. It's the way it's written out. It's the way our society runs. The same as if federally the federal government had some issue with the way we're running something, they can speak in as well. It's opinions matter, and And what I dislike about HRM, and I ran for council in 2020, what I dislike is the fact that it's a huge echo chamber most of the time, and outside voices aren't listened to. When you talk about the wildfire, I live in Tantallon. There you go. There's an echo chamber issue. The after action report that DNR and the fire departments all undertook, not one person outside of the municipality and their staff was inquired about, what worked, what didn't work. Citizenry were not contacted. There was no outside opinions that they sought. And it's just it's a good example of what an echo chamber or council is. And to stay in touch with what the public needs and wants, they need to look outside of that room.
Nick, I appreciate your call. Thanks, pal.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. We got a bit of time to the top of the hour, and get some open lines for you as well if you want to weigh in on this. Again, 902-405-6000. Should the Premier stay in his lane, or does he have every right to weigh in on municipal issues, including this motion by the Mayor, Andy Fillmore? Again, Sean Cleary calls it undemocratic and suggests the Premier wants to run Halifax. Again, Sean Cleary will join the show Thursday at 10 o'clock. Here's an email or two. Let's see. This one from Ron. Ron says, instead of looking at the horrendous amounts of money going out, perhaps we should be looking at exactly who's getting this money when it comes to the construction of these active transportation. This is which contractors exactly are getting these exorbitant sums of many millions to stack concrete curbs on our streets, taking away parking and making our streets narrower so the traffic can't move well. Do any of these contractors have connections to our city councilors professionally or personally? If so, how? This and any issue that has 400% cost overrun warrants a forensic accounting investigation. 902-405-6000. Jamie's giving us a call. Hello, Jamie.
How you doing?
Well, you?
Not too bad. I just wondered, do we know the numbers or how many bikes we have? Like, don't they have to register their bikes?
No, I don't. People don't have to register bicycles, to my knowledge.
Well, like the taxpayers pay for the roads, and we pay for that through gas tax, right?
Yeah.
Do they get to ride on these roads with no charge?
Well, they would say that they most of them would likely pay and in some cases anyway. I don't know what percentage of cyclists would drive as well, but probably the majority would have a vehicle as well, and so they would say that they're paying their taxes and they're paying probably municipal taxes and they're contributing through the tax system in other ways.
But they wouldn't be driving their cars on the newly paved bike trails.
No, that's true. I hear you. So, Jamie, are you suggesting that they should be having to pay tax or registration fees, that type of thing? That's what you're getting at, is it?
I was under the impression that bikes are registered and it would be very easy to find out how much money you're spending for a small amount of people.
Yeah, to my knowledge, Jamie, they're not registered, and some would say that would be a deterrent if you had to register bikes. That would lead to less people riding bikes because of the nuisance of having to do that. That's a counter to that. You don't buy that, Jamie? What are your thoughts?
Well, we got to register our cars to drive on them.
No, I get that, but the argument is that they're trying to encourage as many people as possible to get on a bicycle, and if suddenly everybody had to be registered and licensed to drive a bike and insured, then fewer people would be driving a bike.
Yeah, I just find it hard to believe that there's more than, maybe 1,000 people in Halifax are on bikes daily.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the real numbers are. Anyway, thanks, Jamie. Appreciate the call. Take care. All right, thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Again, Sean Cleary will join me on Thursday to talk about this, and I'll get his take on it. Again, he'll kick off the show at 10 o'clock on Thursday. And thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. The Science Files with Rob Thacker when we come back. All right, it's the Science Files with Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University, astrophysicist. If you've got a question for Rob, give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us, as always, of course. Dr. Rob Thacker, welcome.
Hi there, and we get to test something today.
Oh, yeah? What?
so it's sunny, right? So
Yeah.
will anyone call in? The hypothesis is...
That's true. No. Last week, of course, it wasn't sunny. We were loaded with calls.
We were loaded with calls, yeah.
All right,
absolutely.
so let's break the trend.
Okay.
Despite the sunshine, let's get lots of calls. It's a sociological experiment. How's
Exactly.
that sound?
Yeah, the hypothesis is we won't get any calls, so let's see how it goes.
No, we'll definitely get some calls. So if you're out there and you want to break the trend, give us a buzz at 902-405.
Prove Dr. Rob wrong.
That's right. Hell with the sunshine. We've got plenty of sunshine right here with Dr. Rob Thacker. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's see. I thought I had an email question or two, but I don't. Anyway, 902-405-6000. So, Rob, before we get into this, before we go to the phones, what's new in the science world?
What's new in the science world? So this is a fun study that's come out about last week from some researchers in Denmark, looking at how, depending upon the type of society you're in, whether it has prevalence of corruption and poverty and inequality and things like that, what the sort of level of what are called dark personality traits. So that's things like narcissism, psychopathy, and all of those things that generally we consider to be somewhat negative. They may actually benefit the individual in certain circumstances, but it's probably not going to be a huge surprise for people to hear that as you look at societies and they have higher levels of corruption and inequality and so on, then believe it or not, dark personality traits are more prevalent in those societies.
Yeah. Do you think that a certain amount of people are predisposed to these type of traits in any society?
So, I mean, people have looked at this for a long time, and there is certainly a lot of studies that suggest you can expect a certain number of deviant people within a given population. So yes, to a certain extent, that there is always going to be this population of people who have those traits. That's inevitable and seems to be the case pretty much anywhere you go. It's a question of how those traits get amplified. There's a nature and nurture side to both of these things, and so this study seems to suggest, and I will say, the trend is not incredibly strong, but it's there, right? So I mean, I had to go actually to the paper and look at the graphs to see it. So it is, and they've done this also not only for countries around the world, where literally you take the country, you look at the overall level of corruption and so on, which they had to put numbers on, obviously, and then the sort of like documented cases of dark personality traits and so on. And so they've done it for countries where you see the trend, and then they've done it for US states as well, which I thought was really interesting. And you see a very similar outcome, that there is this sort of like general trend upwards with more prevalence of these dark traits as you have increases in corruption and inequality.
And to that, though, affluence, and that creates indifference at times, and people become spoiled, and so there's no perfect system, right?
Well, I mean, and there will be some people who will argue that affluence is a product of self-centeredness, right? So some people will take that view. I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but there certainly are circumstances where we can look at where people have gained their wealth through exploitation of others.
Yeah, I mean, you look at inequality, and that can create good traits as well. I think of the Depression, of course, in the 30s, and people suffered greatly, but that led to an era of people who cared more about and valued more about dollars and cents, and learned how to save and learned how to respect that. So there's always that, right?
So I think we have to be really careful when we look at these things, because there's a tendency to sort of associate the creation of wealth as being a negative thing, and it doesn't have to be. Right. I think that's important to say, right? Yeah. Now, it can be in certain circumstances, and you can have exploitation, et cetera, for sure. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the case, right? And there are functioning companies for whom the actual sort of like generation of wealth side is not their primary goal. Like you have this whole sort of grouping of B corporations where they're concerned about stakeholder and generating value beyond just what's on the actual balance page. Yeah,
I guess what I'm getting at is there is a value to learning how to struggle, perhaps, and some people turn that into that they learn valuable lessons from that, which can go generational. And those lessons can transcend generations.
So I don't disagree, but my only sort of reaction to that is the outcomes depend upon the situations, I think, as well. Mm-hmm. Right? So I don't disagree that having a challenge can get you to rise above it, for sure. But there can be some challenges that no matter what you put into them, you're just not going to be able to get out of it.
Sure, that's right. Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. Dave, hello.
Yes, good afternoon, gentlemen. I got a couple questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
For Rob. One is there's kind of an unusual thing. It's a rarity, I guess, with oarfish. I don't know if you've heard about oarfish. Oarfish, they're called the doomsday fish. And when they wash up, I guess legend has it, or lore has it, that there could be some kind of a natural, whether it's an earthquake or whatever. They're very long fish. They tend to linger in the depths of the abyss, sometimes midway, in the columns midway, but they've been 3 or 4, maybe 5 washed up in areas such as Tasmania. I think that was June 7th. New Zealand, South Island of New Zealand. And I think there's one that's recently been washed up. I don't have the dates, I'm sorry, on this, but in India. And they're a very unusual, prehistoric-looking fish, and they don't generally come near the surface. So I guess what I'm wondering, and we've had a lot of solar activity, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not a conspiracy theory, but I always keep my mind open, and I think nature can tell us a lot of things. I really do. The groundhog does, doesn't it?
Let's not go there.
Yeah. But I think nature does, right? I mean, native peoples have probably played a lot of nature and figured out things without satellites and what have you, the harvest moon and what have you. So do you put anything in that? So I'm actually surprised you don't know what an oarfish is, but that's fine. It's under the sea. It lingers very deep, and usually something has disrupted it to come to the surface. They don't normally get caught in nets because they're usually mid-column or deeper. Yeah, so there's that. And, of course, we all know about that area with earthquakes, tsunamis, and what have you, which we've had in recent times, really. Do you put anything into that?
So let me try and take a step back here, Dave. So your general question, right, of is there ecological knowledge that's been developed by different peoples over time that is of value? And the absolute uncategorical answer to that is yes, there is. Right. And so this is something in terms of understanding cycles of populations and things like that. People intimately understand those. Peoples have been doing that since time immemorial, and that is valuable. And I say this speaking as someone who's worked. My partner is an environmental scientist, and she has indeed worked with communities because of their knowledge of past populations. Right. So definitely there is stuff to be learned from that. Now, with something like what did you say, doomsday fish or something like that?
Well, I think that's what it labeled as. It's an oarfish, and it's very prehistoric when you actually see it. And they have been a few that have been washed up of recent times. They're very rare.
Okay, so if they're very deep, my reaction to that is they probably haven't been particularly well studied, right? So it's probably difficult to connect them directly to reports of catastrophes and so on with their general habits of how they're feeding and where they're feeding and so on. But for something like this, my reaction is if it's a bottom feeder, then they could well be facing growing difficulties with things like buildup of plastic pollution and stuff like that.
That's very sad if that's the case. Yeah. But anyways, I found that very interesting. Do you have one more time for one more question?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, we know what's going on in the Middle East right now. And with the nuclear storage that Iran has in the, I think it's Fardo area in the mountain, right? And I guess they're trying to get at that, whether it's Israel or the assistance of the U.S., and it's under the mountain several hundred feet.
Yeah.
If they do use, say, a
bunker buster?
A bunker buster, yes. They're that's about the only thing that can get in there, I gather. And they have this uranium, God only knows what they have under the mountain there, percolating, right? Evidently, they say they're close. Who knows? I don't want to get into that to becoming a nuclear bomb. But if that's the case, and they hit this with a bunker buster, could that create maybe earthquake or a complete disaster with, say, radiation and fallout from this? Just curious, and your professional opinion.
So I'm honestly not sure what form that this enriched uranium is going to be in, right? So if you take depleted uranium, right, then that's literally a metal depleted of the high radioactivity isotope. And so if you blew that up, actually, it wouldn't be great, but it wouldn't be a terrible disaster. Right, and so there's very little risk of being able to create a sort of like nuclear explosion from this, and so on. So that's what's not going to happen. Then you've got the wider distribution of this basically radioactive substance. In all honesty, uranium is naturally occurring, right, and we have depleted uranium literally as tank armor. Right. So. Right.
Yes, it's very stronger than lead, I think, or heavier.
Yeah, heavier than lead. That's right. So it wouldn't be good, but it wouldn't be a total and utter disaster either.
Well, you know what? My phone call was worthy because that's reassuring. Yeah. But how about this? Could it? And like Iran in that area is earthquake prone, I think, in that whole region. Could the velocity of and this is a big. Whether it'll be used, who knows, right? Could it rattle and create a shifting of the Earth in that region there or wherever? I mean, this is not a good thing, period, right, to drop something like this.
So, honestly, I'm not a geologist, so I can't tell you what the overall load you're going to have to... I mean, there are examples, for example, go back to the 50s and nuclear tests. There are examples of nuclear tests that were done underground that created... instability in the local area. That's well known and documented. In this case, it depends precisely where the fault is, right? And what the overall weapon load is, right? I don't think they'll use a nuclear bunker buster. They're not going to do that. But will it go deep enough to create a problem? Yes. And I mean, it's well known. This has been discussed in the news that the US is the only country with a bunker buster that would go deep enough to actually do damage.
Sadly, I think that's where it's leading to, but let's hope not. And thanks very much. I do appreciate you taking my call. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, pal. Take care. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. Right, the Science Files with Rob Thacker continues. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Aaron's giving us a call. Hello, Aaron.
Hey, how are you guys today?
Doing well.
Good, thanks.
Great. I got one thing I'd like to talk about when you were speaking about psychopathy when you first got on here today. I was wondering if you'd heard anything about psychopathy being an evolutionary trait from the caveman days when they had to face off against things like mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and stuff like that with spears, and that trait has been carried on today. Into humans today, and possibly it was a survival, something for survival for us back in those days.
So, I mean, that's sort of like the evolutionary psychology approach to it. I mean, I have to be careful because I'm not enough of an expert on this to really discuss it in detail. I'd love one of my colleagues from the psychology department to discuss that. But I've certainly heard people talking about how the trait depends upon the society that you're in and how the prevalence of it will depend upon literally whether it's selected against or not. I mean, my reaction is there are definitely circumstances where you can think of where it's going to be beneficial to an individual to show those traits, sort of like disrespectful of others, impulsive, responsive, could be risk-taking. That's one of the key things, right? So you can argue that there are going to be circumstances in which risk-taking does tend to actually benefit the individual. So I don't necessarily discredit that. I think there probably is an argument related to selection involved, but I don't know enough about it to really have an educated conversation.
Okay, I got another question for you. Have you heard anything about the recent study where scientists had measured light coming off of the dying human body?
Light coming off a dying body?
Yes, they measured a dissipating actual light, like photons, coming off of the human body as they passed away.
Right, so my guess would be that's associated with chemical reactions inside cells, right? There are going to be some particular reactions that produce photonic output, so I don't know what they would be off the top of my head. But as you have the body shutting down, my guess would be that you're literally going to see those reactions tend to slow down as the body dies.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Take care.
Okay, bye.
902-405-6000. David, hello.
Hi there, Doctor. I wanted to ask a question. First of all, I'm coming to Canada in July, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. I've been there. We're going to be in Halifax for a day.
Okay.
And then in Montreal. Looking forward to it. I have asked this of several knowledgeable people. The sun comes up in at different angles because the Earth is tilting.
Mm-hmm.
Why does the moon come up through a 30-day or 28.4 days from one? It doesn't come up in the same spot every night. Why not?
So, I mean, that's very true. So what's happening is you're literally being at different points of the moon's orbit, so on a day-to-day basis, and that's the key thing to remember. So as you have the moon going around the Earth, then on a day-to-day basis, where you are because of that tilt, and again, the moon's orbit is even tilted more than the sun and the Earth on the ecliptic, then it's going to be at a different point because you're not at the same point on a day-to-day basis. So it has to move. In fact, it's moving much more than the sun does on a day-to-day basis. As you go from one day to the next day, the sun only moves a little bit between sunrise. But for the moon, where it comes up is going to move much more than that because it's, as I said, going around on a much faster time scale than you're going around the sun.
Oh, yes. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Hey, thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, thanks for the call.
Enjoy your show.
All right, great stuff. Take care. 902-405-6000. Alan, hello.
How you doing?
Doing well.
Good. Question for Dr. Rob. The so-called Golden Dome.
Okay.
That he's proposing.
Yep.
Do you know anything about it? There's very little that I can find on it. Essentially, what could you just drill down in a brief discussion as to what is?
So Golden Dome is basically, really, in my view, kind of a resurrection of what was called Star Wars back in the 1980s, right?
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the concept that you can build a system of anti-ballistic and now anti-hypersonic cruise missiles that allows you to take them out before they actually come down and impact. And so that could be a combination of ballistic weapons, it could be a combination of beam weapons, and so on. I've not seen detailed discussions of what particular approaches they're going to be using. I can tell you that in the 1980s, the beam weapons they were talking about were by and large considered to be really too difficult to design to make them effective. Ballistic interceptors have actually gone on a long way. They are much better, as we've seen with the Iron Dome, right, in Israel. So that's actually been quite effective. But at the end of the day, I don't think that anyone's really tested these against hypersonic cruise missiles, which are coming in at considerably higher speeds. And the reality is, this is what was pointed out way back in the 80s, even if just a handful get through, you've still got millions of casualties.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And the money that we're going to spend on that and, people being homeless and hungry and so on and so forth.
I mean, this is one of the things people talk about spending on science and NASA and things like that, but you compare that to how much the US spends on defense, it's enormous, right? It's hundreds of billions.
Absolutely. I appreciate the answer, sir.
No problem.
Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files continues with Dr. Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Sharon's done just that. Hello, Sharon.
Hi there. How are you?
Doing well.
Excellent. I was just calling. Your previous caller was mentioning how light was captured on a person when they were dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to say, I believe that it's the electromagnetic energy of a person's soul leaving their body. And there were photographs taken of people kissing. Years ago, it was in encyclopedias where they caught the electromagnetic energy between the two people kissing. So I know that it's not something that's scientifically proven that a soul leaving a body would leave a rapture of light, but that is what I believe it is.
Okay.
And I think it's worthy of topic of conversation. And just can I switch to a 180 degree and talk about Jack and Lily?
Okay.
Okay. Well, I was just talking with a woman this morning, and she heard that a psychic had tried to figure out, she tuned into what happened, and there was a party at their place the night before, and she believes that something happened to Lily where she was injured, and her brother was so close. I think that the woman thought that they.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with where we're going down the road with this, Sharon. I apologize. Thanks for the call.
That's okay. I just wanted to say that the spirit world.
Okay, there we go. Just don't want to go down the road with that.
Yep.
902-405-6000. Not to dismiss.
No, I mean it's a tricky thing to talk about because there's people who have very specific views, and I'm not going to come down on those people because those are very often ways of looking at the world that are distinct from the way I look at the world.
Sure.
Right. So, but I will say in terms of measuring things like the soul, I mean, if you're going to say that the soul is something that you can measure in terms of electromagnetic energy, then we actually have ways of doing that, right? We can literally put magnetometers in that will measure the magnetic energy and so on. So I think what we need to remember is that there actually has been a lot of paranormal research done a long time ago now, and it was really not finding anything, because you can imagine if you could find something that gave a particular evidence of, I don't know, extrasensory perception and things like that on top of things like souls and so on, then that would be very useful to have. But ultimately it came up not finding anything. And people often say, well, what about the study that found this, the study that found that? And the reality is that when you have hundreds and hundreds of studies and you look at things from a statistical perspective, like the sort of golden rule is you look at things that are better than 95% probability. But that means if you have hundreds of studies, there are going to be a few studies that show correlations that literally are just statistical.
Yeah.
Right. So
is there some innate need or desire to believe in something larger or something, and some would say has that been implanted in our DNA?
Yeah. So certainly people have discussed that. I know Richard Dawkins has written at length about this. I mean, I think that there is some kind of prevalence for this, because if you look at pretty much all countries around the world, right, they have some concept of higher beings, right? So and that alone is interesting to think about, and why would that happen? Now, if you're Richard Dawkins, you then go off and you try and come up with an evolutionary argument for why those kind of things happen, right? But my own personal standpoint is that we have created a system, a belief system, that there's literally nothing I can do to disprove it, right? And in that concept, there's no point in me trying to do that, because I'm literally going to have to say or make a statement that there, quote unquote, isn't a God, like the statement of atheism, is as disprovable as the situation on the counter side, right? So you end up with sort of like what philosophers have said. You take some kind of gambit on some view that you have, right? And so that's how I look at it. I'm never going to criticize anyone who's particularly religious, because that's a choice that they've made.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah. And I do find it interesting that societies that have been completely isolated from each other, whether it be Easter Island or whatever it might be, all have this same inherent belief that something is bigger than them, right? That to me is compelling.
If you're Richard Dawkins, you think it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Right? So it depends upon your particular perspective. And so when you have things you don't understand, right, as happens in any world that you grow up in, right, there are things you don't understand, then you look to higher powers to explain those. So when you're a kid, you look to your mum and dad to explain things, right? And so then there are other things that they can't explain. So there's always this sort of hierarchy of knowledge and understanding. And that tendency, I think, inevitably pushes us towards investing in something outside of what we see. I completely get it when people say, the world is so amazing, I simply can't believe this has happened by chance, right? And that is a reasonable thing to say. The concern I have with that is it hasn't happened by chance, right? There are plenty of selection effects that go on over billions of years that create some really incredible things. Don't get me wrong. I think the human brain is an amazing thing, right? But that didn't happen overnight. That didn't happen randomly. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Alexander, hello.
Hi, good afternoon, Todd. Good afternoon, Dr. Thacker.
Hi there.
A question I had was on the new observatory just opened in Chile. I just wrote it down here. The Vera-C-Rubin. Yeah, facility just opened recently. But I was under the understanding that the James Webb was the be-all and end-all of observatories. Why are we still building observatories, and why in Chile? Because there's 2 or 3 more coming online in the next few years.
So that is a great question. I'll send you the money in the post for asking it. So here's the reality. No single telescope can do everything. The same way if you look at what kind of traffic we have on the road, we have cars that are designed just to take people. We have trucks that are designed to carry cargo, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you build a telescope, telescopes can look at different areas of the sky. They can look at different wavelengths of radiation, whether it's light, whether it's near infrared, whether it's radio, whether it's X-rays, whatever. And so the Rubin telescope is an optical telescope that's designed to look over enormous swaths of sky. Right, it literally will survey the whole sky, the southern sky in this case, because it's in Chile, every 3 days. Right, and so what does that mean? Whereas something like James Webb can see a tiny piece of the sky, and we look at that for a very long time, Rubin can see it all. Right, and so that is opening up what we call the whole field of time-based astronomy. Right, we're literally going to be able to see how things change across the whole sky on a 3-day cadence. And we have never, ever done that before. And this is creating a whole new field of what's called transient astronomy. So we're expecting Rubin to find a whole bunch of things that we have no idea about.
Okay, but why Chile and not the Rockies?
Why Chile and not the Rockies? So literally because there's more interesting astronomical objects in the southern hemisphere sky than there is in the northern hemisphere sky. Right.
Oh, it's that simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we want to build a facility, most of the time, if it's only going to be one, we'll put it in the south. Not all the time, but most of the time. Right. So the sort of next best place to put it is arguably Hawaii, but there's kind of a moratorium on putting more telescopes on Hawaii right now.
Okay. No, it was an interesting article, as they were saying 75% of the data that comes from telescopes comes out of Chile, and I was just sort of curious why that was.
Yeah. So it's actually you won't be surprised to hear that this is a real sort of like discussion point within the community, because we want to have both north and south telescopes so we can see the whole sky or what's across the whole sky. But very often you'll find that if you only have one choice, most people will want to put it in the south.
Okay, no, great. Thanks again for your time.
Okay, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Harvey, hello.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
We're doing well.
I'm not calling about light leaving the body.
Okay.
Be clear about that. But I am calling about what you were talking about last week, namely the rare earth hypothesis.
Sure, yeah.
You got me very curious about that. I'm currently on chapter 3 of the book.
Oh, great.
I was able to find. Also, the Wikipedia article on it is very intriguing, and again, I'm not educated enough to know if it's correct or not. I'm just wrapping my head around it. Apparently, it's kind of a rejoinder from Carl Sagan and Frank Drake and their idea of the principle of mediocrity. The idea that we happen to be in the right type of galaxy, and we're at the right place in the galaxy, and we're in the habitable zone in terms of where the Earth is placed, and it all kind of makes sense to me.
Yep.
What's cool about the Wikipedia article, it kind of concludes with scientists who agree with it, and then scientists that have been critiquing it, because again, I don't know if it's a hypothesis or a theory, but I haven't quite concluded on that. But I guess what I'm doing is I'm kind of trying to put you on the spot, Doctor, and I don't mean to, but I'm just curious about...
What do I think?
What do you think, basically, yeah.
I actually do kind of subscribe to rare earth. I think there's a lot of points in it that I think are important. We have a very unique situation, and I pointed this out last week when we were talking about it, that if there's actually a possibility that we are the only planet in the entire universe that has involved intelligent life. And the weird thing for us in that scenario would be, if that was the case, we would look at ourselves and we would tend to think, we're here, there's got to be others, right? But there wouldn't be in that scenario. So we have a statistical bias in some sense to presume that this has happened elsewhere. And it's not crazy to do that when you think about how long has passed since the Big Bang, how big the universe is, and so on. But the challenge is we don't know enough about how life actually gets going to really be able to put statistics on it. And that's the challenge. But I think as a sort of like basis for sort of making people think about how difficult life might be, the whole Ward and Brownlee argument is a reasonable one, right? But it's difficult to refute in an absolute sense.
Yeah, and to get back to the caller from last week, and I don't mean to put words in his mouth, but I got the feeling that he was basically thinking that there might have been a divine factor in terms of the fact that we have intelligent life on this planet, which I think a lot of probably theologians have been making for many, many years. It is interesting in the article, there's someone named Stuart Taylor who basically has concluded that it's probably our solar system is probably unusual because it resulted from so many chance factors and events.
So we're getting to the point where we can actually start putting numbers on that, right? And there does seem to be a pretty unusual number of things that have happened in our solar system. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be other ones like us somewhere out there, but we certainly... I have to be careful here because there is a bias. Like, we can detect planets that are bigger than the Earth right now pretty easily. Ones that are smaller than the Earth, we only have one methodology for detecting them at the moment, right? So my feeling is, knowing where the field is going to go, we actually will have a much better idea on this within the next, I'm going to say 20 years, right? Because we have a new telescope that's going to be online about 2028, 29, the European Extremely Large Telescope. And that's going to be able to push down the detection mechanisms down to around Earth-sized planets. So we'll be able to do that for radial velocity measurements and so on. So that may give us a better idea. At the moment, we have thousands and thousands of planets around other stars, but we don't have good classifications of the planetary systems of those.
Yes. So if there are like rocky planets close to the sun and they're in the Goldilocks zone, would it be possible to see if they have water? Because water seems to be a key factor.
So that's a challenge, right? Because to really be able to figure that one out, you've got to get the planet going front of the star and then making measurements. And so here's the thing, right? You can't do it on just one transit. You need about 10, 15. So if it's the Earth, how often do you transit? Every year. So that's 10 or 15 years to get all the data.
Yeah, and again, what's really amazing to me when you think about chance happening on this planet is like 90 years ago we had this asteroid that hit the planet and wiped out the terrestrial dinosaurs.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden these little mammals who became us, would we be talking right now if that asteroid had not hit the planet Earth at that time?
That is an extremely difficult question to answer. I mean, people have hypotheses that reptiles could have grown brain capacity and so on. And there are other people who argue, no, cold-blooded creatures couldn't do that. They need to be warm-blooded. Anyway, I don't get into that personally.
No. But again, thank you for your time. Like, I think this book is a fascinating.
Keep reading.
Book.
It's a great book. Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Thanks, Harvey.
Okay.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We get some open lines for you. Get some time to the top of the hour as well. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, got a bit of time to the top of the hour. If you'd like to get in a question with Rob Thacker, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files. Again, 902-405-6000. Rob, you sent me an interesting story Is Google about to destroy the web? Tell us about the story.
Yeah, so this is related to Google's new AI mode, as it's called, which is literally putting an AI system on top of web search. And some of you may say that's happening already. Yes, it is. But this is that on steroids. So instead of getting literally like a list of search hits and so on, what you're going to get is, yes, you will have the link, but with that, you will get a sort of like explanation of what's in the link, right? And so part of this is motivated by the fact that we're seeing the web searching has evolved from looking to find things to looking to get answers to questions, right? So this has changed a lot. And obviously things like ChatGPT is now, here's your online answering system. So this is trying to bring all of those things together. And it's a little bit worrying, right? And the reason is, if you're just trying to find something out, right, and then you click on a web search and so on, and then you get this summary, are you going to click on the link then? And the answer is probably not, right? So while your website will appear on Google, right, and it will say it made an impression, someone got to see it, what's called the click-through rate, which really matters if you want traffic on your website, that is expected to fall. Now, Google is defending it, saying we don't think that will happen. We think we're going to do everything we can to provide lots of diverse searches and so on, right? But most people who are involved with literally building websites and shunting traffic around are really concerned that this is going to have a profound impact on the amount of website visits that happens, right? And so let's say you're a news organization and you want people to come to your website to read your stories in detail. What's going to happen is this AI mode will take something from your website, pass it, rewrite it in its own words. It's not going to copy and paste because that would, quote unquote, be theft, right? And then tell people a short summary before they then go and click on it and go down to the actual website itself, right? So that is a profoundly different way of interacting with the web compared to what we do now, right? And so you can obviously imagine if you are a news website and you get ads and now you don't have people clicking through, that's going to have an economic impact on you.
Wow.
Right?
Interesting. So is this inevitable? It's happening?
Yeah, it's happening.
Yeah. Right. And what can reverse it?
Well, Google is arguing that they think this will not impact traffic significantly. They think that people will still continue to get diverse searches. There are some people who are concerned that this will actually end up promoting some websites to the top and others to the bottom, but that's already happened, I think, in searches that we've seen with AI in the background. So there are groups that are saying we will band together and we will put what's called a bot blocking on to stop the actual searching of the website by bots. At the moment, there's a very simple way that's handled. They will probably try and look at more complicated ways of doing that. But here's the challenge with that. If you don't tell Google, if you're preventing Google from listing or taking information from your website, then who's going to find you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is a real challenge for the web. And there's a lot of hand-wringing going on about this. And will it change the way we work with the web? I think absolutely. And the simplest analysis I can give you, or comparison I can give you, analogy is the word I'm looking for, third time lucky. If you go to a library, you're getting a book, right? You don't go to a library to get a summary of the book. Right? But this is what's going to happen with web searches. When you're web searching, you're looking for something. Now you're going to get a summary of it. And this is all because of the way that searching has become merged with asking questions.
Wow. Interesting. All right, let's try and get one more in quickly. John, you got to be real quick, though, if you can, please.
Hi, Dr. Rob. I just wanted to add to what you've been talking about. Out there in crypto world, we call it somewhat AI agents. So we have AI, which is like ChatGPT and all that, but on top of that are going to be AI agents. And quickly, agents will be people's personal secretary, personal whatever. So an example, if you have a lawyer that's doing some type of a large trial, you type in your AI agent and you say, I need to represent this person. I need you to find me case study, blah, blah. You be very, very specific, and they'll lay out your whole plan for law as an example. So these are your AI agents that are out there right now that a lot of people don't really know because it's hidden from them. Thank you, Dr. Rob and Todd.
Okay. All right, great stuff.
So agents, I mean, this is, John's brought up a good point. Yeah. I mean, one of the concerns with agents is, there's the potential for a huge loss of privacy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And that's, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that you can imagine AI agents would do that would be useful, but what privacy are you going to give up to do that, right? That's the big question.
Rob, thanks for doing it.
Thanks very much, everyone, for the great questions.
All right, that's Dr. Rob Thacker. That is the Science Files. We do that each and every Tuesday from noon until 1. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it. Thanks to Vanessa Van Ness as well on the other side of the glass at the control boards. Doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.